Okay, it looks like most people are getting on. Thank you, everybody, for joining us today. I'm Kelly McDevitt. I'm the president of the Integrated Benefits Institute, also known as IBI. For those of you who haven't been on one of our webinars before, these are the result of our research projects. We go out every year and ask our 1,800 plus members what's keeping them up at night, and we research the top 5 priorities. This year, as you can imagine, attraction and retention is one that has really got employers' attention. If you're reading the news every day, you understand that employers are in this return to office strategy that is greatly influenced by their attraction and retention philosophy. As you have been seeing in the news the last 2 weeks, some employers are taking a very hard stance on return to office. Some are offering better and richer benefits to their employees to attract, and some are still in the midst of making decisions about how it's going to work for each part of their business. I think that we found from our research that many employers are kind of taking a wait and see attitude, or they're also taking an attitude of adjusting work schedules and benefits according to their employees' preferences. And so we're going to get into the research today and talk about that. We have a special guest today, Nicole Black from NASA JPL, who is going to join us for our employer discussion after Sarah presents her research. If you have questions, please put them in the Q&A box. I'll try to answer them as we're going, and then we'll save, obviously, any questions for Nicole until the end. So I'm going to have Sarah go ahead and take over.
Thanks, Kelly. Hello, everyone. I'm Sarah. I'm a researcher at IBI. The attraction and retention in a post-pandemic era was one of our first projects for the year. So thank you for joining us for this webinar. Just a little bit of our agenda. We're going to have an overview and background, the research questions and methodology, findings, a summary of everything, and then hopefully a wonderful discussion. So as we all know, prior to the pandemic, many organizations were already grappling with talent shortages and the need to retain top talent in highly competitive job markets. But the pandemic really just exacerbated these challenges because employees are now seeking greater job security, flexibility, and work-life balance. As a result, I think employers have had to adjust their recruitment and retention strategies and offer flexible work arrangements, enhanced benefit packages, really looking at a holistic view of employee well-being. The pandemic had also led to significant economic uncertainty, so businesses were struggling to stay afloat. This resulted in slowdown in recruitment and increased focus on retention as employers tried to prioritize their existing workforce and also keep an eye on the cost not so much during the pandemic, but certainly just after the pandemic when purse strings started to tighten. We also saw a new kind of trend happening called quiet hiring, where employers were kind of repurposing their existing employees into new roles. But how does that strain retention efforts in terms of burnout? So for this study, I'm going to go through some of the figures before we get into the methodology, something that came up in the literature as I was doing my overview and background. So in 2021 and 2022, the voluntary resignation rates were over 30% higher than pre-pandemic levels. Millions of US adults were voluntarily leaving their job. They were citing burnout, lack of organizational support, insufficient health and wellness benefits, prioritized mental health benefits not being met as reasons why. And high turnover led to tangible business impacts such as decreased productivity, lower customer satisfaction, increased costs for recruitment, onboarding, and training of new hires. And these statistics here are just some of the statistics we've seen in the past 2 years from various research done on what we've been calling the Great Resignation or the Great Migration. As I said, over 50 million people quit their jobs in 2022. And you can see the trend here. There was a big dip in 2020, actually, of turnover, and then it's just started to rise and rise. And I suppose at the end of this year, we'll see what it looked like for 2023. Just some key figures here, demographically and industry-wise. The leisure and hospitality industry faced the biggest turnover, which makes sense because of the pandemic. And Kentucky actually had the highest turnover rate by state in the last 2 years. So employers were reporting a lot of challenges in the last couple of years. 61% of employers reported having difficulty retaining talent, and 73% were having difficulty attracting employees. Employee turnover in the US costs companies at least 1 to 2 times of an employee's salary, and that can really differ depending on the type of employee that you're trying to attract or retain or replace. 75% of employers say they do use employee feedback for benefit design, and 82% said that they've seen improvement in retention with a great onboarding process. So for this study, we had several key questions to uncover overarching insights and advice to help organizations enhance their talent management. So I'm just going to read through these questions quickly and then get on to the methodology. What are the key changes and adaptations in attraction and retention strategies that organizations have made during and since the pandemic? Which changes of these strategies were most effective, and how was success measured? What are shared recommendations and insights for organizations on retention and employee satisfaction after onboarding? And how are employers staying in touch with employees' needs and preferences? And with cost considerations a priority, how will employers balance business needs with employee preferences? With these research questions in mind, we developed a methodology that is different from what we typically do at IBI, but because this project or this topic is so popular, there was so much research already done, and we were interested in collecting that research and doing a systematic review. We wanted to see what other people were saying, how is it matching up to what we're seeing? And so we decided to conduct a systematic review. We used databases listed here, and in addition to those databases, literature searches were supplemented by looking at reference lists of the articles that were found in these databases. The titles and the abstracts were screened out according to our inclusion and exclusion criteria, which is listed here. So for example, the study had to be on adaptations and changes to attraction and retention strategies. It had to be US employers only. There is a lot of research on this topic outside of the US. And the studies had to be recent, published since 2021 moving forward. So we were interested in search terms like employee attraction, employee retention, COVID-19, post-pandemic, that whole list there. And we were interested in looking at articles that were varied across industry and location in the United States. And we also were interested in articles that had a larger sample size.
And for those of you who have seen our research produced before, you'll know that we don't typically do a research review, but what we found is that this topic, because it's changing literally weekly, this is something that employers are struggling with every day right now. And so to select a large publicly available data set and go back to historical data would have taken us back to 2020 and 2021. We need to know, and employers need to know what's going on today and how employers are making those decisions in the current time. So while we prefer to use very large data sets to do our research, we found that this was a much more timely method for us to get the word out very quickly on what's happening in real time. Thanks, Sarah. Go ahead.
So this is just a summary of the amount of articles we used and how they were chosen. So I went through 1,355 different articles using the databases that I mentioned before. 55 duplicates were removed. And then the remaining abstracts and titles were screened. And after those screenings were done, 48 full text papers were reviewed and 20 articles were included, as you see in figure 1. Now, the reason the articles were excluded, obviously we use inclusion exclusion criteria. I think the main reason I excluded articles was because they were not in a US population. And I think if I were to do this using an international population, I would have hundreds of articles. There's so much research done on this topic internationally. So what did we find? I think that in reading the articles, I was able to separate or distinguish 2 categories of adaptations: tangible strategies and emotional intelligence. So employers adapted by increasing things like flexible and remote work options, emphasizing employee well-being, implementing new technologies, revamping and recruiting the onboarding process. So those were kind of like some of the impactful changes that they made. I think it's really important in this slide to separate out the way the employers looked at what they can do tangibly, as in like, you know, collect data and use it, customize this to benefits, recruit employees who share the vision and mission of the culture, and also include the emotional intelligence for a holistic approach to this. So looking at pain points that employees have and addressing them, understanding that employees are multidimensional people and how they can strive for equity and reward and recognition. Recommendations include prioritizing work-life balance for employees, building an inclusive and equitable culture, encouraging professional development, and focusing on the company's purpose and social responsibility, and investing in onboarding. So it was really developing and investing in your employees holistically rather than only relying on data and finance or cost mitigation. One of the big things that came out that I saw over and over in the literature was this sense of meaningful work. Employees are now really looking for something that matters to them and that had a company or organization that has social and corporate responsibility. So how are employers staying in touch with employees' needs and preferences? So employers are using tactics like employee surveys, meetings, evaluations, anonymous feedbacks, even social media to stay in touch with employees. A new, or not, maybe not new, but one that's coming up on the trend is our employee resources groups. So employees safely gather together. It's like a focus group on a topic or an interest and give feedback to their employers. The communication is a two-way engagement, and employees' evolving priorities and pain points are important for employers to understand so that they can provide the right support. So a quick summary of what we talked about. The numbers in the brackets represent the number of articles that referred to these points. So you can see a lot of the articles are saying the same thing, and that's not surprising. The most effective adaptations were around enabling flexibility, focusing on culture and diversity, increased communication and career development, and success metrics were engagement, retention, and productivity. But organizations also have to live their mission and value their people, not just focus on the numbers. Employees are looking for purpose and care. Okay, thank you. Now we'll move on to our Q&A and discussion with Nicole.
Okay, so thanks, Sarah. That was a lot in a short amount of time. And obviously our research papers in their entirety are available to IBI members on our website, on our research page. So as I mentioned before, I have Nicole Black with us from NASA, JPL, the Jet Propulsion Lab, who runs benefits for NASA. And, you know, Nicole, this topic, you and I have talked about this a lot, and we talk about this topic a lot with all of our employer board members. One of the probably biggest challenges right now, I think, for many HR people is that we have so many competing priorities as a team. And the priorities from last year are completely different from the priorities from this year. And so, you know, we've experienced 36 months or more of this place where we were all really open wallet and wrapping our arms around our employees because we had to take care and make sure that they were all whether they were working at home or in the lab, well. And we had to support them. And now we've kind of come full circle. And I hear a lot of employers talk about the financial pressure, recession, inflation, the market itself, the very tight job market, et cetera. And so now we're trying to meet employee needs like we never have before, while we have all these downward pressures from the C-suite to say, well, not only do we have to take care of our employees, maybe we have to save some money too, or really dive into the whole attraction and retention and what that costs our company to keep up. So I don't think I've ever seen this sort of pivotal place, this reflection point that we're in right now in the market that we have today. And it's not just attraction retention. Attraction retention now becomes this customizable strategy for an employer based on what generations they're dealing with in their workforce. Because we know from the research, different generations want a whole lot of different things from their employers and from their benefits. We know that we've completely redefined our social contract with our employees. I've been around a long time, so I remember a long time ago, we were afraid to ask our employees anything personal about themselves. Now we have to go deep into their lives, which now has no separation anymore between work and life, right? And we're asking them questions to try and get to a strategy that is more personalized and preferred. But those things, those new ways of doing business for the HR team create whole new sets of problems, right? And opportunities. So I want to kind of talk about what you've learned over the last 12 to 24 months and how NASA JPL is approaching some of these issues, because I think that employers more than ever are willing to talk openly about these struggles because we're all dealing with the same thing. So let's start with you introducing yourself and your background, and then we'll get into the questions and I'll monitor the Q&A box as well.
Hi, thank you, Kelly. So my name is Nicole Black. I am the head of benefits for NASA JPL Jet Propulsion Laboratories here in Pasadena. We have about 7,300 employees on lab, and I've been with JPL just over a year now. Prior to that, I worked at Adventist Health as their director of benefits and retirement, and have spent about 30 years in this field working for a variety of different industries, everything from aerospace to healthcare organizations and financial services.
Awesome. Thanks, Nicole. So let's talk about how the pandemic really changed the way we approach employee demands. And I use the word demands. I know that's a strong word, but recently, I really think over the last 6 months, we're moving beyond and past employee preference and into employee demands. We're reading the news. We see companies that are saying back to the office or else, and employees that are answering with, well, then I'm out, right? So that becomes a demand. So how has your strategy changed to try and meet those demands, but also remember that you've got business KPIs and demands from your business?
Absolutely. So like any other business, I think we all have to just start with knowing our business and knowing our employee value proposition and assessing what are our strengths and where we have opportunities when looking at the marketplace. So I'm lucky in JPL being a part of NASA, right? We have some cachet. So attraction isn't probably our biggest issue. We don't have any problem attracting candidates, not only because of the cachet of NASA, but the type of projects we do, the Mars rovers, the type of work we do. It's not just one small piece of a component on some spacecraft. It's going from concept to design to build to operating those, right? And it's who you get to work with. We have 46 Nobel laureates, more than any other place in the world. So it's a very exciting place to work. But just like any other business, we also struggle with retention for a variety of reasons. And yes, this pandemic has been challenging for us all. And we actually failed to make a launch, right, for our Psyche mission. And so we had to go through an internal review board. And a lot of that was attributed to the lack of on-site collaboration as everybody was working remotely. So definitely there's been a lot of pressure on the organization to bring people back in-house. And so January 30th of this year, we moved to a hybrid work schedule where everyone's expected generally. Our general telework policy is to be on lab 3 days a week. So that is our current standard work schedule. So, you know, you can see that we're trying to maintain some level of flexibility, but while ensuring that everyone is meeting together at least once a week as a team.
So let's talk about that, because that seems to be a rub for many employers right now, is the return to office strategy that's a partial return. You know, probably over the last 12 to 18 months, most employers have tried to adapt some sort of back to office or RTO strategy. And what we're hearing from employer and employee is that those who didn't make anything mandatory or create this sort of set of rules and guidelines around that return are struggling, because they're saying pick your day, right? So first it was 2 days a week and people were coming back Tuesdays and Thursdays maybe, or Mondays and Wednesdays. And they'd get to the office and find either that there was no one else there, or that they sat in their cubes and Zoomed with each other.
Exactly.
And so when we talk about return to office, I think the word I'm hearing most now is purposeful return to office. That if I'm going to commute, or, you know, I've sold my car and I've got to get on public transport or the train or whatever to get to work, and it's, you know, taking productivity time out of my day, what's in it for me? Is my team going to be there? Is there anything planned for the team? How are you approaching the days that you're in the office and making sure that those days are productive for everyone, for the company and for the team?
Absolutely, the focus has to be on being, you know, purposeful time, because I think we've all experienced that, right? Where we come into the office and we're sitting alone on Zoom calls and we're like, why are we here? So definitely, I mean, that's a dissatisfier if we fall into that trap, which I think a lot of us have and have been struggling with. So one of the approaches we're using at JPL is really making the lab someplace exciting where people want to be. So not only having that 1 day a week where everybody is on lab at the same time, but we're doing everything from having ice cream socials to dance parties to, we're always lucky and we have great speakers here. So probably every other day there's some presentation going on lab with astronauts or whomever, you know, cutting edge research. And, you know, we have family days and tour days and take your child to work day and all sorts of things going on like that. And also an initiative that I'm working on is redoing our wellness room. So we're lucky enough to have a space on lab that was underutilized, especially during the pandemic, where we used to host a bunch of exercise classes. And obviously, you know, that, you know, with everybody working remotely, that just wasn't working anymore. And even on a hybrid schedule, you know, people, you know, weren't interested in dialing into yoga class from their cubicle or from at home. So we're getting really creative. And so we're working with the wellness dollars that we get from our 2 healthcare carriers. And so we're building a room where our employees have really had, as your surveys have shown, focus on mental health and being able to connect. We're building a space where they can come to meditate. We have yoga mats, we have nap chairs, we have massage chairs, like the full body 3D massage going on. We have puzzles, and we have an art space where people can do paintings or do coloring books. And so just get in their zone. We're adding a sensory deprivation room. We have a lot of people on the spectrum here at lab, and we have a lot of people who it's very heavy brain work and they just want to, you know, unplug for a little bit. And as we have learned in the wellness space that, you know, people can go to a place like this and meditate and just have their quiet time. Their stress levels can drop up to 68%. So, and concentration goes up. And so definitely looking for any of those opportunities where we can support our employees to de-stress, you know, to reduce their anxiety and to connect with their fellow JPLers.
That's awesome. And, I applaud the effort to include family in these types of things when you have, ice cream day and such, because I think that part of the disconnectedness and the dissatisfaction that people have about returning to the office is their, previous freedom to spend time with their families during their workday when they have time. I'm interested in how you would approach this with folks who have to be at work. And I know obviously in your prior position with healthcare workers, you don't have a choice. There's no one working at home. Everybody's there. So people who are in manufacturing or must be on site. Do you think that some of these tactics that you're using in these are kind of feel good things for your employees to make them feel both cared for, obviously from the wellness room, but kind of fun too? I mean, I remember back in the very old days, we used to have ice cream socials that our building held every month and that kind of thing. And they were always very well attended. I'm not sure why we didn't think of those between then and now. But those things that you're trying, do you think that folks who must be at work, obviously, and in jobs like manufacturing and such, or healthcare, do you think those types of things would work in those positions as well to make them feel more cared for and have something to look forward to in their schedule, in their day?
I do think so. I mean, you see people getting excited about the activities that we're having on lab and knowing that we do care for them, and and those stressors and anxiety, or you bring that to work and you bring it to home, right? I know they call it work-life balance. I just don't think that's quite the right words. I've heard work-life integration. I don't think that quite fits either. But we obviously, are whole people, and I think there is kind of a natural, at times, like friction, right, where some people may be expected to be on lab all 5 days by the nature of their work, right, and others may not be, and so we definitely are attempting to demonstrate, through multiple ways, and like how much we care about our employees, and they're supported. So one of our challenges is commutes, right? Where the lab is in Pasadena area is very, very expensive. And so when you're early career, it's pretty cost prohibitive to move here. So we have people with extensive commutes, and so working on van pools and some of those types of solutions. And if you get a van pool together, you can get a Tesla to drive into work and charge the car, right? And so coming up with creative solutions like that. Also, we have multiple clubs on lab where we go for hikes, and there's puzzle competitions and various things like that, where people really can start to feel connected and can recharge.
How have these ideas had an impact on employees? What do they say about these things, and are they participating? Or are you getting good participation and engagement?
Yeah, we're absolutely getting great participation. We just did an engagement survey similar to what you're talking about in your research, Sarah, and we had over 1,600 responses about what people were looking for in their wellness program. And it was just such a great data set to mine through and get all sorts of insights into what people really wanted and needed, and to help them feel supported. And we also just hired a brand new wellness lead here on lab, someone with 20 years experience, creating new wellness programs from scratch. So we're redefining our pillars of wellness and redefining that for our employees. So we know that we're supporting them, mentally, physically, through nourishment, through, financial wellness, and we're avoiding the word spiritual, but going more towards purpose driven, like what's your why, right? And making sure that that's supported as well. So really striving to meet people in all of their different areas of wellness.
You talking about this makes me think about back in the day, in the early 2000s, segmentation was the big buzzword, right? You had to know your population, you had to segment them into personas or avatars or whatever you called them. But that's important again now,
Absolutely.
because in order for you to address these both disparities that they may have in different segments of your population, but also preferences, and be able to address them, you need to know who your people are. And I love what you said about this whole work-life thing. I don't even use the words work-life balance anymore. It's just life balance now, because
Right.
both are so ingrained in each other at this point. I don't know that there is a separation anymore. And I think the jury's still out on whether there should be, but
Yes.
while we're in the state we're in, let's just call it life balance. And so you addressing not only what you think they need, but what they're telling you they need. So let's get into that, because this, I think, is one of the biggest struggles for employers right now, because remember, we talked about downward pressure. There's different businesses have different financial concerns depending on the markets, depending on funding, depending on what business they're in. But I think all are at this point where they've thrown a lot of money at benefit programs in the last 3 years, and out of necessity. But what we didn't get out of the last 3 years was this idea that they are all the solutions that you chose are working. Some came with no data, some came with no ROI or BOI story, but we needed them as solutions in the point in time where we were. And so, short of going through an entire consulting process where you're spreadsheeting every point solution you have, how much you're spending, how much you're saving, do employees like it, the whole nine. When you're thinking about now where to invest your money, are you looking back at what you've done over the last 3 years and thinking about, are these things serving us? Are they serving our employees? I mean, are our employees really engaging? Because let's all face it, 3% engagement that we used to accept as a okay never for the industry, that's never going to fly again. So are they engaging? And does it help our business? I think we're back to trying to understand whether the investment in healthcare is an investment in our businesses. And your CFO certainly wants to know if that investment is worth the output, right? So how are you approaching, where do we now spend our money and make our investments in the healthcare strategy? And are you measuring whether that relates to your business outputs?
So I love data. So I'm a very data-driven person. I will say that I think we've evolved in the wellness field where, we're moving away from just understanding that you may have a high incidence of diabetes in your population. And so you're going to offer this diabetes program and expect things to change and be able to measure that. I don't know if anybody's been tremendously successful with that. I think, we've had to evolve past that. And so I think redefining wellness is broader than the physical. And it's not just exercise, and it's not just diet, and you can't just poke people to do that, right? Or say, do these challenges. I mean, you tend to have the same small population who probably are the ones that need it the least, who are participating over and over again in those programs. So I think the more broadly you can define it to meet your population's needs, and whatever that means to them, I think is important. And especially in a population like JPL, where we have our longest tenured person has worked for JPL for over 60 years. It's incredible. And
Wow.
so we have a lot of very long tenured, employees and older population base. But we also have our new postdocs coming in. And so understanding the benefits that are important to them. So for example, postdocs usually go on these 12-month rotations, right? Where they get assigned to this, one field of study, and it's like a 12-month project assignment almost. And so we find a lot of our, young women postdocs don't feel like they have the time to start their families, because, that could jeopardize them coming back, and this isn't just JPL, this is anybody who in our industry who's dealing with postdocs. Can they really step away and have that child and then stay engaged and be able to get the next 12-month assignment as a postdoc, right? So they're finding that it's, a choice between career and family. And so, yes, we're looking at expanding our, family supported benefits, right? Like carrot and progeny and some of those types of benefits, right? Which is very different than, some of our very long tenured workers' needs, right? So it's really that struggle of trying to meet everybody where they're at. And I don't know if anybody has a perfect answer to that, but I think offering the broad array so that they can just find what they need.
Totally correct. And I think that where employers, to your point, I think that those sort of disease management, patient management, utilization management programs that we have been using for 25 years have now become table stakes. Like they're not what we concentrate anymore. They're just the basis from which we then build. And more to your point, those incentive programs that we used in the past to get people to engage, and this is one of the questions that came in the Q&A, and we have been horridly unsuccessful in getting people to engage. And then when we go back and look at the data that shows that the people who actually did engage were the ones who were well controlled and healthy anyway. So we didn't reach the intended population that we were trying to get in the first place. We now need to rethink. First of all, I think the definition of engagement just needs to be redefined. We started somewhere around the 3% range. If you got more than that engaged in your program, you were a rock star. And now, unless you have a per participant payment model, I can't imagine that 3% is ever going to fly again when you're paying for, a population of 100,000 employees, right, and less than 1% of your employees are engaging in a program. So can you talk about how you address engagement in your population and getting people educated, aware, and connected to your programs?
Communication, right? It's all I think about, communication. And the team here at JPL and Benefits, my goodness, we do more communication than I've seen anywhere else, but we also need to make sure it's streamlined, it's impactful. We're not just flooding them. And so we do a very large effort in trying to do targeted communications to certain demographic groups, et cetera, that, and like with our retirement provider right now, we're working on a very concierge curriculum driven retirement education. So kind of playing into the fact that we're part of Caltech and higher ed. So instead of just saying we have these 6 retirement seminars offering, webinars that we're holding this quarter, it'll be like retirement 101, 201, 301, 401, right? So they know which sequence to take the courses, and we also try to direct them into, like, during early career, focus on this, as you're nearing retirement, this is what you need to be focused on. So making sure that their efforts are also well focused and they're not getting lost in all the great materials we have out there. We're completely redoing our intranet and our benefit sites and our benefits at a glance. And we have, everything from the social media to the digital billboards, right, to very little print media these days. But luckily, we're also, unlike my last organization, JPL is substantially one site, one massive lab here, right? And so we do have our employees in one location, which does make some of our communications easier, right? Like when they come in the gates, we might have signs up reminding them about open enrollment or different events that are happening that day. So we do have some nice levers we can pull that way. But I think, if you're excited and you can demonstrate that the value that they're going to get out of it and that you really do care, I think just bringing your, I think people in the benefit space tend to be people who really care about others, right? And I think if you have a team that really demonstrates that, and the employees know that you're putting together a great curriculum and a great set of benefits with them in mind, and you're listening. And we have public chat channels that my team's on all the time, responding to employee questions, and as they come in, it's really become a really good 360 dialogue, where it's very interactive. And believe me, we have, with incredibly bright people we have working here, we are challenged all day long, questioned on Secure 2.0 and everything else under the sun. So it's a really dynamic environment that we work in here. And I have I have employees that actually read the footnotes, right? So it's a good dialogue, but I mean, again, that varies so much.
Talk more about that chat function, so they can ask questions and you have somebody monitoring that.
Yeah, so we have Slack available, and any employee could even create a Slack channel. So we have over 370 Slack channels, and employees have set up channels by various topics. And I think it kind of shocked me when it came to work at JPL. I think I shared this story with you once before, Kelly, is, neurodiversity is a huge topic here. And we actually have a neurodiversity channel where employees talk about their mental health diagnoses and medications they're on and all that. And it's so, it was startling to me that people that were that transparent with their personal medical information. But it also really spoke to me about how safe they felt in talking about those and accepted for who they were. And we do have a number of ERGs, and we have a Center of Inclusion here, and we have a brand new DEIA officer, so diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility. So that we have a little bit of a different take on that. And the organization also just released its 3-year plan with 7 strategic initiatives. And 2 of those initiatives are directly speaking to employee attraction, retention. We just had a 2-day career development fair where we're helping employees work on their career paths and how to write their resumes. And if they want to get involved in this other project over here, how do they do that? And all the different learning and education tools, so that we're really helping employees grow in their career here. Because I think again, understanding your workforce, one of our challenges is we have people that stay, like, that woman who's been here over 60 years. So sometimes people aren't leaving. So our talent pipeline, kind of gets a little sluggish at times, right? And so making sure that those mid-career employees understand that there's still opportunities for growth and waiting for that next opportunity to rise.
And I think that's one of the results that we found in the research too, that sometimes employers don't think about. It's not just the money, and it's not just the flexibility that employers leave their jobs. It's that they don't have a clear, and I think part of this is the halo effect of work from home. They don't have a clear career path anymore. And some of that is from the disconnectedness to the senior leadership team and to their own leadership teams, because they don't see them except on Zoom, right? So it's not like you're having water cooler conversations about, well, hey, I saw that so-and-so is going to be retiring. Would I be in line for that job? That doesn't occur anymore. And so when you're in a fully remote environment, employees have a hard time seeing, where do I go from here? What could be my career path? So I applaud you for providing that information to them in a constant stream where they can see a clear path and they feel very supported in chasing that dream, right? So I think that's one of the bigger things that employers right now are missing, is that piece for personal development and education, and not understanding what their career path could look like. So that was a great one. I'm going to take a couple of questions from the Q&A right now, because we've got some really good ones. So we talked about, one person asked about morale. You talked about all the events that you have at work and the cool things that you have to support your employees. We talked about the flexible work arrangements. This one is so cool. And I'd love your reaction to it, but it's another thing that employers often forget, and that's social responsibility. And how, especially, I think all generations, but especially some of the younger generations, are extremely passionate about social responsibility, about sustainability, about the earth, about our environment, etc. And so this person said, our company has a hybrid for most of their employees at headquarters and warehouse support. They do common work from home days so that they're on the same schedule. They are the Hope, Health, and Happiness Company. So their vision, pillars, and mission includes emphasis on team members' involvement, serving, and donating. So they've made social responsibility part of the workplace, and they actually give employees 16 paid hours volunteer time a year, and new hires get prorated amount of their paid volunteer time. They equate social responsibility as part of well-being. How do you all look at that?
I think JPL is extremely purpose-driven, and I think many people may think of us just as part of NASA's being focusing on outer space or Mars or or Voyager missions, et cetera. But actually, over half of our missions are Earth sciences, and so we have. We set up the first satellites. We're just launched SWAT last year, right? Where we're monitoring all water on Earth simultaneously. So for the first time, we can understand, the glaciers and the lakes and the rivers and the streams and the oceans and how they're all interacting together, right? And climate change. We were providing data, like Phoenix last month for the first time had 31 straight days over 110 degrees, right? And understanding how, the human impact of, the roads and the buildings and absorbing the heat and reflecting that back, et cetera. So, we've got people going down, the Yukon River in Alaska and the glaciers in Antarctica, measuring, all sorts of environmental impacts, about our Earth, trying to protect our natural resources. And a lot of what we've developed here, original technology, has gone to support, Earth sciences and our climate. So I think you get a very passionate group here, who feels like they really are making a difference. And we do feed into that as well. I mean, we absolutely have lots and lots of volunteer opportunities, everything from like Habitat to Humanity to, there's a school for underprivileged children nearby that we support, and a bunch of other things like that as well, right? So I think we could do more, like my last organization was very mission driven too, at Adventist Health. So I think there's some great ideas I could even take from that, experience that, we could bring forward here at JPL as well. But I think it's, we all know the research that if you're purpose driven, you tend to be more engaged, you tend to have higher output and better results. And so it's definitely time and money, I think, well spent.
That's what I was going to say. Like, you see it in the research that social responsibility and meaningful work, they go hand in hand.
Yeah, absolutely.
Kelly, you're muted.
Thanks. Sorry, I had background noise here. I think that was a really great point that Marty made, because employers, when designing well-being, are really in this, like I said, pivotal moment where the word well-being, it used to be that was your wellness programs and your DM programs, right? Your disease management programs. That was well-being back in the day. Now well-being includes social responsibility, DEI. It includes caregiving. It includes all the mental health resources that you have available to your employees. These are much bigger, broader topics that we now discuss as part of well-being, which is so smart. I think it's so smart what you're doing, what you all are all doing collectively. One person picked up on and I was going to come back to it anyway, but one person picked up to the new letter that you added to your DEI program. I would love for you to talk about that.
Accessibility. So really understanding, those that have various challenges with, access. And actually, I count myself among those. So it was near and dear to my heart to see that letter added to our DEI officer's title. Here on lab, we're in the foothills of the San Gabriel Mountains. And so it's a very hilly, we have 168 acres, and it's like San Francisco. And a lot of our, and our buildings date all the way back as early as the 1930s. Some of them, this is where rocketry was developed in this dry riverbed here at the foot of the mountains, right? So some of our buildings are old and when people weren't really thinking along these lines. And so I'm part of the facilities accessibility committee as well, and really evaluating, how do our employees who are in a wheelchair or have other limitations can get around lab and feel really welcome and be independent. And that's something I'm extremely passionate about, especially as I faced my own disabilities recently. So.
Yeah, and I think that that's a really important distinction too. We've been dealing in this industry with this host of unaddressed or under-addressed issues. I think the SDOH issues, the DEI issues were just so exacerbated by the pandemic and brought so much more to light. And then we added on to that this new phenomena of actually communicating very deeply with our employees. And so we learned so much more over this past 12 months about not only what they need, but what they've been missing, right? So as we're designing these products and programs and solutions for the future, how are you thinking about, and I realize that you work with rocket scientists, and so we're dealing with different sets of the types of employees that some folks have in their business than you do. But how do you address the issues that were sort of those always existing barriers to care, including things like disability, and how exacerbated they were by the pandemic, for your go forward strategy, because those things aren't going to go away. They didn't go away. They're probably bigger now than ever. And so as you think about attraction and retention, and both either at work on campus or working from home, how are you talking to the people who were sort of left out from the beginning of the conversation or felt like they weren't being tended to before this all started? How are you moving forward with a strategy that's inclusive of everyone?
Well, from the physical side, there is the Facilities Accessibility Committee that I just touched on, but we also have had listening sessions with different groups, and I don't want anybody to think that we're just limited to like physical disabilities. It could be, the whole range, could be ADD or ADHD, right, or someone with Asperger's, or eyesight issues or hearing issues. And so most of our town hall now, we have a sign language interpreter available and things like that. And I do see some generational differences about expectations around that. And so that's always, interesting to observe and try to, meet the various needs. But I'm really glad, that I belong to an organization where they've made that a priority to really understand all of those different accessibility issues, whether it's like even being able to read or navigate a website easily and the fonts that are being used and all of those types of things as well, and software programs. And, sometimes it's, voice recognition and any number of other things that we can, deploy to make this a better experience for all of our employees. Yeah.
Yeah. And one thing I just wanted to say too, that I've worked with companies that are the same academic level as your employees at other engineering and space programs and flight programs. And what I find is, even though your people are very intellectually intelligent, they still might be passing on the benefit decision-making to their spouse at home or their partner at home. And so one of the questions that was asked in the Q&A was around your communications. And you talked about, you have probably one of the most robust communication. I mean, you don't leave it to your people to go find information on their own. You serve it to them on a silver platter and make sure that they are aware, and you help to educate them in every step. How do you help the other decision makers in your population, which are the spouses and partners at home, to be part of that conversation?
Most of our resources, insofar as benefits, are, absolutely shareable. You know, spouses and other significant family members or advisors are always welcome to. You know, we provide retirement consultation services. My team does, and so so either in person or virtually. So people will come with their spouses. You know, the websites are usually accessible by, you know, through an external website as well. So, you know, we host every year. Social Security comes and presents to us a couple times a year. Medicare comes and presents to us a couple times a year, right? So we try to put all the different pieces together. And just to touch on it, like we completely redid our value statement, and we just pared it down to 3 values, and they're bold, inclusive, and trusted. So I thought it was really telling that, you know, inclusive is one of the 3.
Well, and, you know, we've talked about this before. We see a lot of employers in the last 3 years that, you know, inclusivity, DEI, whatever acronyms or words you want to use, we see a lot of box checking. And yes, we have a DEI officer, and that's kind of where it ends. And I think that if nothing else, what employers are learning from doing research with their own employees is that that's not enough. You can't just speak the words and check the box and move on. This is going to be something that employers are going to have to concentrate on if they want the workforce that they want, right? So this whole way we started this conversation was around employees' preferences turning into demands, turning into an attraction and retention strategy, measuring against business results, right? So I think everything that you've told us and shared with us is how a company builds those things in tandem. It's not one or the other. It's not us against them. It's us all included to make these decisions and strategies together for the betterment, not only of our employees, but of our business, because we can't forget our business goals, right? So I applaud you for taking the initiatives that you have just in the short time you've been there. I know you've done a tremendous amount of work to get things going there at NASA JPL, and they're all to be applauded. I also want to thank our audience for joining us today. Thanks for taking an hour out of your busy schedules. If you are IBI members, as I mentioned, the research will be available, and a copy of the webinar will be available to you on the IBI website. Their research paper, the one-page infographic, and this webinar are all available on our website after the webinar. Nicole, thank you so much for your time. And Sarah, thank you so much for hard work on the research. That's all the questions that we had in the Q&A. So thanks everybody for joining.
Thank you.